Hey, pizza people, welcome back. Hollywood Pizza here, and we've got a hot steaming deck for you today. That's right, we've got some Boros Beatdown, some Boros Burn. Essentially, this deck does have quite a bit of ways of modifying your creatures as well, putting counters and everything, so lots of different ways to attack your opponent. Let's go ahead and dive right into the deck. We have 4 Hopeful Initiates for our 1-drops here. Essentially, this card can grow bigger with the training ability as long as you have a creature that has a higher power when it's attacking with it. And later in the game, if need be, you can actually remove 2 counters from among creatures you control. It doesn't just have to be the Initiate to be able to destroy a problematic artifact or enchantment. There's tons of those cards running around from Portable Holes to Asika's Chariots. And let's not forget our favorite card that gets played quite a bit recently is going to be that Fable the Mirror Breaker. So this card is great early, and it helps against some of the problematic cards in the format as well. We also have 4 Kumano Faces Kakazan, just a fantastic 1-drop. For 1 mana, you get a Saga, so you get 3 abilities out of this. The first one being is that it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each Planeswalker, so sometimes it can help get rid of like a Lolth that potentially is just hanging around after it just made some spiders, or maybe even any Planeswalker that has been ticked down to 1, so just a really solid card overall. On top of that, the second ability gives a +1/+1 counter onto any creature that you play during the turn that it gets to the second part of the saga, and then on the third part you get a 2/2 with haste that essentially exiles anything that if that source gets dealt damage it would die. So overall, our 1-drops are kind of just like really powerful. They do a lot of different things early and they do a lot of different things late. So we also have Play with Fire here as well as a kind of just like efficient burn spell, 1 mana. Essentially just like the classic shock, you can aim it at your opponent. You can kill a problematic 2 toughness card, maybe like a Blood Tithe Harvest or anything like that. And it also has the upside of if you do hit your opponent with it, you get to scry 1. So a little bit of card selection in an aggressive deck is always really nice. 4 Luminarch Aspirants, just a great 2-drop. Essentially makes any of your cards bigger. Can put a counter on itself. Kind of fits the theme of Hopeful Initiate destroying things, or maybe even Thundering Raiju, which we'll get to later. Valorous Stance, here to protect any of our cards against removal spells, or even killing like a problematic Hinata, anything with 4 toughness or greater. So very great flexible card. Really useful in this type of style of deck. I do enjoy it as just a 1-of. Bloodthirsty Adversary, just another fantastic 2-drop that only gets better as the game progresses. You can either get a 2 mana 2/2 with haste, or if you already played a Kumanos, you can get a 2 mana 3/3 with haste. And then later on, when you have 5 mana laying around, you can just play it out. It gets a counter by itself when you put that 3 mana into it, and you get to cast an instant or sorcery 3 or less from the graveyard without paying its mana cost. So just a solid card. 4 Royal Eruptions, the Lightning Bolts, pretty much lightning strikes, if you will. Deals 3 damage to anything, though it is at sorcery speed. The kicker ability can sometimes be useful as well, but overall, this and the Play with Fire can definitely help burn out your opponent rather quickly, especially if you're flashing those cards back with a Bloodthirsty Adversary. We also have some really good removal here, able to take out any cards that are like a real threat that kind of get outside that 2 to 3 toughness range. That's going to be Brutal Cathar. When it comes in, you get to exile something until the card leaves, and then later on, it'll come in as a 3/3 first strike that your opponents have to pay 3 life if they target it with anything. Just a really solid card overall. Sunrise Cavalier, somewhat of a surprising card. You usually see this in draft a lot more, but it has actually turned quite a few heads around lately in Constructed. 3 mana for a 3/3, trample and haste. It automatically turns it into day when it comes in if neither is around, but whenever it becomes night or day, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that you control. So it can either continually keep growing or make some of your other cards bigger. The curve topper, essentially, the kind of finisher in the deck, is going to be Thundering Raiju, a card that we've been seeing played in some decks between its printing and now. 4 mana for a 3/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, you get to put a counter on a creature control. Then it deals damage to each opponent, where X the number of modified creature control other than Thundering Raiju. So, tons of ways to put counters on with Sunrise Cavalier, Luminarch Aspirant, the Bloodthirst, you can get a counter itself, Hopeful Initiate, Kumanos. Essentially, there's just tons of cards that'll modify your creatures, and this card can deal upwards of like 3 or 4 damage in the game, and on top of that, it can even deal it out of nowhere if your opponent's not ready for it. In terms of special lands, we have 2 Den of the Bugbears Just a classic, solid red creature land. One of Crave of the Frost Dragon to kind of fly over opponents if need be. An Aganjo to kill anything that's problematic. You can even kill Goldspan without giving your opponent a treasure. One of Sukenzan to give us a couple other creatures if need be as well, with haste on top of that. For a sideboard here, we have 2 Thalia Guardian Thraben, or excuse me, 3 Thalia Guardian Thraben to help with any kind of spell-based strategy, control strategies, anything like that. Obviously, it does hurt us a little bit, considering that we are running a decent amount of non-creature spells, but the trade-off is definitely worth it, considering this card is just really powerful, and it's still really good against runes as well. For Kami's Flare, essentially kind of just dealing another 3 damage, like a Lightning Strike card, to a creature or Planeswalker, but if we have a modified creature, it actually gets to deal 2 damage to that permanent's controller, so could actually just end up burning out your opponent as well with these. One of Showdown on the Skulls to kind of help against any mid-range or control strategy to help refill our hand, and potentially those second to third part of the Saga is going to help make all of our creatures taller and be able to get in through for more damage. An additional Valor Stance to help protect us against any type of removal-based deck, or if we need to destroy something that's 4 toughness or greater. 4 Elite Spellbinders for anything that could potentially be mid-rangier or controlier. Just a really solid card overall. Gives you a ton of information on top of that. It flies, so could end up getting there with the Raijus and the Luminarch Aspirants, pumping up that Spellbinder. A couple of Angel Fire Ignitions round out our sideboard here, pumping up our creatures and essentially kind of giving them like invincibility for a turn with that indestructibility. The Vigilance is great, Trample, Lifelink, it kind of just has it all on one card. You don't really want to bring this in against all strategies, you know, mostly against anything that's aggressive or even the mirror match, but I think overall it's just a great addition to have in the sideboard. And I've even thought about maybe bringing them into the main, but we'll see. So yeah, this deck has just been really, really good for me. We ended up ranking up quite a bit back up to the 400, 500 range again in Mythic. So I hope that you enjoy the games. I know that I definitely did. Definitely check out all my content as well in the description below. And we'll see you on the battlefield. Jumping into some games here with Boros Aggro. See if we can rank up a little bit with it. It's a deck that I do enjoy quite a bit so far that I've been playing it. And we do have a curve here, some creatures to play, some burn spells in between. And the Cathar can actually just remove anything that's an actual threat. So we'll go ahead and keep this hand. Gonna go ahead and start off with this Luminarch Aspirant on turn 2. And I think I'll go ahead and play the Mountain, holding up this Play with Fire just in case we can burn something down. Opponent does have Chandra sleeves, so pretty surprised. No red there. Okay, we do have another Brutal Cathar, so our burn spells could potentially just go to the face. If we can get a couple hits with the Luminarch Aspirant, we'll be pretty happy with that. Opponent getting down their second land. Could end up being potentially like an Innkeeper or like a ramp spell. Ooh, looks like we're playing against runes. So we'll go ahead and get this Cathar down. It fills the curve, uses all of our mana, and we're still able to kill the threat. Go ahead and get a hit in here with the Luminarch Aspirant, and we still have a Brutal Cathar and some burn spells to kill some other things that get in the way here. Opponent has another Naturalist, and they don't have a rune play with it though. I think that we'll go ahead and still play this as a red source. The real decision here is if we want to play another Brutal Cathar. Playing the Brutal Cathar means that we only have burn spells to kill the rest of their creatures. I think I'd rather play with fire instead. Play the Hopeful Initiate. We'll go to combat, pumping up the Luminarch. Smash again for 6. And I think I'd rather use all of my mana now and put our opponent as low as we can on our turn. Pass the turn back. Essentially, we're already representing lethal. The Brutal Cathar can just remove whatever creature they've tapped out to play. So, took down game 1 somewhat easily there, but We all know Runes is a really good deck, so we'll go ahead and bring in some removal spells here. In the Kami's Flare, we also want to bring in these Thalias. They're just solid overall. Thinking about what we'd want to cut here. Probably a couple of these Thundering Raijus. They cost 4. Not really the card that we want to be playing against them. The Play with Fire is also close, or maybe even the Kumanos. Kumanos is nice though because it is a curve filler. Valor Stance is nice. Angel Fire doesn't necessarily help against them. We could actually just cut all the Raijus, considering we're on the draw as well this time. Valor Stance is only good if their creatures are larger. We just have to cut one more card. Maybe it is the Stance or the Bloodthirsty. Now let's cut a Play with Fire just because we know that later in the game it's not going to be good. It doesn't kill a Runeforged champion. It's mostly going to target like a Kami, a Transience, or a Jukai Naturalist, and I'm okay with either, but I think we still have like the Kami's Flare to definitely get rid of some things. Fortunately, no white mana here. We do have to mulligan. Our hand's actually really good if we do draw a white source. We even have a creature and a removal spell. I think this hand's really close, especially being on the draw, but I don't think that I can risk keeping it. This is way better, and we have tons of interactive spells. Do we want to keep the Kumanos is the question. It's going to be somewhat of a threat. On turn 2, we're just going to be trying to cast this instant, so might not be able to get the Brutal Cathar down. Maybe we do hold on to all the removal, knowing that against runes, if you can kill like 2 or 3 of their creatures, you're pretty much solid. Okay, they do have a Generous Visitor to start here. Just go ahead and play our Sundown Pass tapped. See what our opponent has to offer here on turn 2. Okay, Kami of Transience seems pretty good. Do end up just drawing a Kumanos either way. Would we rather use the Royal Eruption now? I guess so. If we're gonna tap out, we may as well just use this. Next turn we can play the Kumanos and then the Kami's Flare after if need be, or just Brutal Cathar something out of the way. Knowing that they don't play as much removal. At least we'll be able to have like a threat on the battlefield. They do have a Runeforged champion here. We'll see if they have a land. And if they do, they're going to be able to play the rune out, so. And this Runemite, they don't have the land. So this is going to get a counter either way. Would we rather Kumano and hold up the Kami's Flare? I feel like that might end up being better, seeing as how they're just going to try to attach a rune onto a creature. I think I'd rather use the Kami's Flare at instant speed and then finish up whatever they have on the battlefield that could be a real threat with the Brutal Cathar. And they have a Naturalist. I think I'd rather kill the Runeforged champion now. Do they have a land drop? If they do, then they do. So they are going to be able to play this rune. I was really banking on them not having a land drop there, but getting burned a little bit for it. Do have a Brutal Cathar to get rid of the Naturalist, but them getting the redraw is a lot more problematic. Okay, Thalia. I think I'd rather kill the Naturalist. Definitely going to be looking for another Brutal Cathar for this Generous Visitor, potentially. Or the Kamiya Transients that they're going to get back here. They have 5 cards. They're going to Showdown. So it does make that a 4/4. Do have a land drop, probably the lair tapped. Would be my guess, or the dual land. Yep, gonna come in with the lair, probably hit me for 4. Go ahead and go down to 11, but we got some other plays here. Only it does help a bit. This is going to get a little bit out of control. So I could see an argument for attacking and then passing the turn back, because then this would flip. I also really like just playing the Thalia just because it ensures that they're going to have a lot harder of a time casting all their cards out. And I think we can just come in for 5 here. Really banking on hitting our one of Valorous or potentially another Brutal Cathar here. But I think that that's kind of our only real outs against them right now. Yeah, I can't really do anything about that. Gonna get Rune Forge. Probably get the Rune with Lifelink here. It is still potentially gonna tap them out. I guess they'll have a mana left if they play one of these lands, but... Yep, gonna go ahead and get the Rune of Sustenance. Gonna be a lot harder to beat them here, considering they're getting a bigger threat and they're adding lifelink to one of their cards. Okay. The Riverboard Champion is also growing bigger as well, so gonna be hard just to break through that alone. And we'll go ahead and just take the 5 here for the first hit. Okay, we draw another Play with Fire. I don't think that's going to be enough. We could have burned them instead, but if we had drawn like a Royal Eruption there, it would have been really nice. I guess there could be an argument to bring this in, but at the same time, like if it's just sitting out there and not getting any counters, it's not really doing anything. Is it better than the Kumanos is the question. We could almost cut some Kumanos, maybe bring back the Raiju, seeing as how we're on the play. Ignition isn't the worst thing either. This doesn't necessarily seem like the best against them. I think Initiate's decent. And I'll bring in an Angel Fire just in case we want to try to win the race. It could be an option. Not sure if it's good against them. I think I just want to try it out mostly. They are an aggro deck, but they can go way bigger than we can. I think I can keep this. Removal plus eventually a clock. Turn 2, kill their card into 3 mana 3/3 with haste. And then more removal spells. Opponent does mulligan here. Go ahead and play the red source, pass it back to them. Tap land, which is good to see considering they didn't have a turn 1 play. And now we'll be able to Kami's Flare into this Cavalier. So our game plan's kind of lining up the way we want it to. They don't have a Naturalist. But we'll go ahead and just kill this now. Get into the graveyard. Okay. Drawing a Hopeful Initiate is nice. We could Hopeful Initiate into the Flare. I feel like that might actually even be better here. We can set it up so that way our Hopeful Initiate can kill some problematic enchantments later. And we're doing okay. We still have a removal spell and 2 others if need be. Okay, Naturalist. And no Rune of Haste here, so we'll go ahead and just shoot this down. Okay, Luminarch's pretty good. I think we still want the Cavalier here, though. Go ahead and get a counter on the Hopeful Initiate. Hit our opponent down for some damage. And then we still have removal spells and a Luminarch Aspirant. Would like to draw land so we can double spell here. Opponent actually does not have a spell to play, which is actually quite interesting. We'll go ahead and Luminarch Aspirant here. putting a counter on the Hopeful Initiate, unless they have a removal spell, looks like, potentially. And we'll attack here for 8 damage. Looks like the Cavalier could be taking it here. Yeah, not really much we could do about that. Still get to hit our opponent here for 4, which is nice. And we'll go pass it back. So right now we do have a battlefield that somewhat sizable in terms of power. And it's continuing to grow. And in our hand we have cards that'll be able to kill anything that they potentially play onto the battlefield. Playing a Runemite on a land is definitely opponent being a little bit desperate here. Dust Flash us the good game. They have another Rune of Sustenance, and yeah, that's pretty much going to be it here. Can actually just use this to burn them here down to 9. And opponent's just going to scoop it up. He had lethal either way, so able to take it down against Runes. Just had enough removal for any of the cards that they played, and that's pretty much what ended up winning us the game there, really, at the end of the day. So, as you saw, we were able to stay aggressive and then burn our opponent out a bit. So, definitely the game plan of this deck, and we'll see you in the next match. Beating down opponents with Boros. See if we can keep the aggression and the burn going here. And this hand's actually really great. We're definitely going to keep this. We have tons of curve, a removal spell early, and a removal spell later. So play this as a red source. Start off with this Kumanos. Make the Luminarch a 3/3. And then potentially a 4/4 with the 2/2 on the follow-up. And then a Brodokathar in between. See if we can draw some lands and some good spells here. Opponent leading off with Field of Ruin. Unfortunately, drawing this end of the Bugbear is a little bit awkward, but we'll be able to manage here. Make this a 3/3. We'll see what color combination our opponent's playing, seeing as how they led off with a colorless land source here. Okay, tap land, so they're playing blue. Yeah, I think we can actually play this Den of the Bugbear tapped. Go to combat. Let's go a little bit wide with these counters. Put our opponent down to 13 and pass the turn back. We have a Play with Fire if need be to their face, and then a Brodokathar on a creature if they decide to play one out. This could end up potentially being like a Sedgemoor Witch deck, maybe Dimir. Oh wow, okay, so it's going to be Izzet. Okay, this card's going to come down. Question is, do we just want a Brodokathar? We probably do. So let's go burn our opponent down to 8 here. Put that land on the bottom. Hope to draw a key spell that's actually going to help us. That's actually really good there. And we'll go Brodokathar here. Exiling the Vadrik. Playing the Hopeful Initiate. Pumping up. Let's pump up the Kumano here. Put our opponent down to 1. And even if they wipe the board, we have a creature land. So right now I think we're looking pretty safe. See what our opponent has here. 4 mana is a good amount. And our opponent's going to go ahead and pack it up. I didn't really have any answer for us there. Going to be on the draw this time. Spells cost X, so essentially they are like a spells deck. Probably would want to bring in the Thalias here. Let's go cut a couple of these. Bring in the Thalias. I guess we... Well, could we cut a potentially Brodokathar? I guess we could. Do we want anything else? You could make an argument for the Spellbinder maybe, just because we can catch something that's problematic. So we can bring in, bring in a couple Spellbinders and see how that works out for us here on the curve. And could potentially give us information while grabbing a card that we want to make out of reach for them. Let's see if we get a good opening hand here. Something we'll be able to work out. And this actually looks decent. It's not like a crazy hand by any means, but can actually Kumanos into the Hopeful Initiate and hold up a Play with Fire, so we can get a lot of spells going early, which is really nice. And the Play with Fire could potentially scry us into something. Opponent did mulligan down to 5, so they're definitely already at a bit of a disadvantage. So us being able to chain a lot of spells off is going to be really great here. So let's go to Kumanos. I do think that that's better, helping us dig into something we want. And then turn 3, we can actually just Spellbinder either way. Set up maybe this Bloodthirsty Adversary for later with the Play with Fire in the graveyard. We do have red mana here. We could go for the Luminarch Aspirant play, but I actually think I'm just going to go with the Hopeful Initiate. And we'll go ahead and pass the turn back to our opponent. I like being able to use this Play with Fire to give us a little bit of some card selection here. They do have a Dragon's Fire, so I actually like having the Luminarch Aspirant in my hand either way, knowing that they could have just snapped off a card for it. Fortunately, we don't get the Hopeful Initiate any bigger, but that's okay. Could Play with Fire into either a land or maybe something that would be useful here soon. Okay, Fable is very good. Do we want to kill the 2/2 is the question. I think we do. We can stay a little bit aggressive here and get rid of a threat that could potentially keep building up their board. We don't want to just give them some free mana to cast more of their spells every turn. Let's go ahead and Spellbinder down, see what they have in their hand. Go ahead and put that Gold Span into exile. Attack for 2 damage. So right now they need to top deck something that they'll be able to play. Probably get rid of this island and maybe the random card that we don't know about, or even this 6-drop that's not going to hit the battlefield anytime soon. Opponent's deciding on keeping all their cards though, so they could have hit something that is useful here. Let's see if they did. Volta Surge, pretty good. Do we want to speed up the clock? I think that we do. So let's go ahead and play this Cavalier. Attack for 5, put them down to 12. They're going to be able to flip this Fable, so a little bit scary. Especially if they hit something like a... I guess it wouldn't be too bad unless they hit another creature. A Fable here would be really good as, like, getting a body down that they'll be able to copy. We also haven't been hitting lands for this Bloodthirsty Adversary, so it's a little bit rough, but... Okay, big score here. Going to get 2 treasures. So that we'll be able to cast this Gold Span next turn. We do get to see what they have in their hand. Let's actually attack for 5 first, see what our opponent does. See if they have a removal here. If they do, then they won't be able to cast this Gold Span. Okay, they have a Fading Hope, which is fine. Comes back to our hand. They do top deck a land, they will be able to get Gold Span down, so they put a card on the bottom. I think I would rather play the Spellbinder out again, just because it flies. If they do have a land on top and they play the Gold Span, then there's not really much we can do about it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I think we just have to keep our game plan going here in hopes to kind of just beat our opponent down. And it looks like they have a Spikefield Hazard, so an okay draw for our opponent. Brood-Cathar is actually really great here. We're going to be able to get rid of this Reflection. They can trade with our etchings if they want to, but at the same time, that'll mean that they'll be having less mana to cast this Gold Span. That's an exile. It looks like they will actually do it potentially, or just make that. Okay, that's fine. Put our opponent down to 8 here. They have a removal spell. Okay. So they're going to get this Fable back. So that's a little bit of a problem, just because the token can also make mana, and they're going to get some value back from this. Okay, we have a Play with Fire, though, which is great here. They can also activate their Crawling Barrens, which is a bit of a problem. Quite a bit of options we have here. I think it's better to put our opponent down to 6 with the Bloodthirsty Adversary. We also get the Scry. And then next turn we have Sunrise Cavalier and the Luminarch Aspirant. On top of that, we could just hit a burn spell off the top here with the Scry, and then... Okay, another Luminarch. Do we want that? I don't think that we do. Rather have like a Royal Eruption or something like that. If we attack, it means they use their treasure, but then we lose a card. I think I'd rather say go now. And then next turn we can set up a turn with both of these, or like I said, we could potentially hit like a burn spell off the top, which would be great. Okay, they don't do anything, so it is nighttime. Okay. We're not going to get to use that ability right away. They have to have a removal spell maybe here. I think I'm just going to go for Sunrise Cavalier and the Luminarch Aspirant. So they definitely have a stop. Could be more than just that. We're about to find out if it is. And I think going wide with the counters is the best. Let's go to pump here. And let's see what our opponent has. Okay, Spectral Adversary is really good, actually. I'm going to be able to phase some of our cards out here. And they could just block the Cavalier. Raiju is going to help, and that does flip, unfortunately. Land and an attack gives them the Goldspan Dragon. Looks like they are going to do that. We'll take the damage. Raiju's going to be huge here. It deals 3 damage by itself. They're going to Goldspan. They do have 2 blockers, but I think they're just dead here. And that also means they're dead. Let's see. Yep, let's go ahead, Raiju. Go ahead, put a counter here. And attack out. Put another counter here. Opponent goes down to 3, and we have enough attackers to take them out. So game plan worked out great. We were able to tax the dragon long enough to take that victory down. See you at the next one. Burning our opponents out here and beating them down. That's right. Good old Boros. So far, really enjoying this deck. Been quite a bit of fun. Fortunately, this hand is not fun as we don't have any planes in our hand to cast our white spell, so we'll go ahead and take a mulligan here. A little bit better. I can definitely keep this hand. I think I'll put back one of the Royal Eruptions. We have a little bit of a curve, so we're really looking for that 3rd land here to get us over the top. We do draw it, so that's great. Seeing if what we have in our hand is enough to take our opponent out here in a quickly fashion. Fortunately, it looks like they're playing Orzhov, so they could be in the colors of removal. It's actually a pretty decent draw there, I think. And I'm just going to come in. Let's be aggressive. I'm probably going to use this underdog to trade with the Initiate. But we have more of an aggressive curve next turn with the Cavalier as well, so going to be able to hopefully keep some of that damage going. Also, don't mind if they bring it back later, right? Just because it's their whole turn. They lose 2 life over it. Okay, they have their own Luminarch. And we'll go ahead and play this and then be able to Raiju on the following turn. So, smash in for 5, potentially putting our opponent down to 13. They will take it. Luminarch's going to get to a 3-3, but we have this Royal Eruption if things get a little bit out of hand. If they have a second Luminarch making it a 4-4, it's going to be a bit of a problem, but Raiju's going to help with that as well. Yep, going to make that a 3-3. Looks like that's all that they have. So let's make our adversary over here 3-3 as well. See what we draw. Opponent is untapped, so I think I'd rather shoot their creature down knowing that they have the removal And then we can try to attack here, see what they do. Probably going to take out the Cavalier. Not yet, it looks like. And they got to have something here, else they go down to 7. So, yep, they got a Naganjo. Getting some good value there off of a land. We'll play this Den of the Bugbear. And next turn we have Den of the Bugbear or this Raiju. So we have a couple different options, which is nice. Really hoping to potentially just draw some burn spells here to get rid of anything that they play or hit them in the face as well. They do have some mana open, a little bit of a sketchy thing here. So let's go with the Luminarch. They have a stop, so they definitely have a removal spell. I think that it's okay to just put everything in here. If they'd rather kill that than the Luminarch, I'm a little bit happier with it, considering the Luminarch plays into the game plan with the Raiju a bit more. And they have 3 cards left. And it does look like they do have a removal spell with that March here, and that's fine. Really happy we didn't come in with the Den of the Bugbear because we made them have to use mana, so that way they only really got rid of one of our threats. Put it down to 2 cards here. They do hit another land, a black source, so they can get this Tenacious Underdog out of the graveyard if they do, please, but we'll have quite a bit of damage here next turn. Looks like they're going to do it, though. Going to go down to 8. We'll get a redraw here when it dies. We have 2 Raijus in a row. Let's go play 1 Raiju here. Put a counter in this Aspirant. Hit our opponent down to 3. Yeah, let's pump this. Or excuse me, down to 1 life because the Raiju is going to deal that extra damage and the counter from it as well. So either way, our opponent has to deal with what we have on the battlefield. And we have another Hasty Thread in hand. Den of the Bugbear. Let's take a look here. So it looks like our opponent's playing kind of like a Mardu mid-range deck potentially. Question is do we want the Spellbinders? Not sure. Another Valor stance. I think we could cut a couple Initiates. Bring in the Valorous. Thalia blocks okay, but not a crazy great card against them. Maybe we want a couple Kami Flares. Cut a Raiju. Would I rather cut a Raiju or maybe even bring this back down again for a Spellbinder? There's a chance. Gives us a little bit of information. And it flies. Would we rather cut the removal spell? Maybe the problematic 1-drops as Initiate worth cutting all out just because we're on the draw. These are all good questions. I think I'd rather just cut the Raiju. Yeah, I think I'd rather just cut the Raiju. Not sure if that's correct. If we're going to be on the play for the next game, then I would bring them back in. And maybe even some of the Hopeful Initiates, considering that we'd rather play those cards quickly. This hand's fine. A little bit too heavy on the lands, but having a card that could potentially be a removal spell or a protection spell is nice. Somewhat of a curve with this Kumanos. Still have a double white to cast multiple spells later when we need to. I think I'd almost rather play both of these in a row. Not sure. Let's see what our opponent does. Probably have an underdog here. No underdog, and we have another Luminarch. So they definitely have to have a removal spell maybe. I think it's okay. We actually have like a really good curve, so I think it's okay to kind of just play our spells out. And there is a high potential that they do have a removal spell here in response. Potentially Vanishing Verse. Frontal Grasp, I'm a lot happier seeing considering that they lose life over it, so our game plan proceeds a little bit further. The Luminarch Aspirant is really good for our opponent here. And they actually have a portable hole for our Kumanos, so a little bit unfortunate there for us, but that's okay. And Brutal Cathar does actually look very great here, as we're going to go ahead and get rid of this Luminarch Aspirant. Forcing our opponent to either play more threats or deal with this Brutal Cathar. And they do have the Vanishing Verse now. And that Luminarch's going to go ahead and be a 2/2. Think we'll play our Luminarch Aspirant and pass the turn back. We have this Valorous stance up in case they try to kill the Aspirant. Obviously, they do have lots of exile removal, so could go against us. We'll see what happens. We're also okay taking the hit here, considering that we were ahead in the race. Okay, that was actually a decent draw there. We'll go ahead and cast this Kumanos. Pump up our Luminarch Aspirant. Come in for 3. Doesn't look like they have any type of removal spell, so we're still winning the race here. We have an Iganjo for their Luminarch if they decide to attack. Valor Stance is still an option as well. And I think we're just going to go ahead and Iganjo here. Shooting their Luminarch Aspirant. Let's see if they have a protection spell. They do not. Do they have a removal spell for a Luminarch now, though, is the question. And that is also answered quickly here. Go ahead and cast the Sekenzan, or excuse me, channel the Sekenzan. Pump up one of the tokens, go a little bit wide, hit for 6. Unless they had a removal here for the Luminarch. If they did, you would think that they would use it before combat, so. We also have Kumano flipping next turn. Unfortunately, no creature land is a little bit annoying, but especially considering our opponent still has 3 cards in hand, so we're not really sure what they could have up their sleeve. Ooh, Meat Hook here is a really good draw for our opponent here, as it's going to gain them some life, keep them in the game. Brugathar isn't bad. We're going to be able to kill any threat that they put on the battlefield, and we're going to be able to protect either the Etchings or the Brugathar with this Valorous stance, so I think we're still okay here. Portable Hole, a little bit annoying, but we can deal with it. Let's see if our opponent casts a creature for our Brugathar to target here. They do not, so we'll go ahead and just get this Hopeful Initiate down. Pass the turn back. Still think I'd rather just hold on to this just in case. There's other creatures we could draw here. Okay, Tenacious Underdog comes down. That's way better of a target here for our Cathar. And let's go ahead and cast this down. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that it was nighttime. So we actually can't get rid of the Tenacious Underdog, so that's actually my mistake there. Well, I guess the good thing is that we could potentially pump this up to destroy these portable holes. And the fact that our opponent has the pay 3 life for the Brute. We have protection, unless it's an exile spell, does help a little bit. Ooh, and they do have the exile spell, unfortunately. We're going to have to pay 3 life for it, which I'm completely okay with. Going to go down to 5. 2 burn spells could kill our opponent. They're down to 2 cards. 1 card now, considering they played the Iganjo, which is kind of surprising, honestly. Gonna come in for 3. We can just take that. Not a big deal. Hoping to draw a Cavalier to pump up the Hopeful Initiate. And we do draw the Cavalier. And we have the Valorous stance to protect it. So we're going to go ahead and come in for 5 on our opponent here. This is lethal. Do they have a removal spell for us? If it's a non-exiling card, ooh. They do have Wandering Emperor. So they're going to go ahead and get rid of the Cavalier here. Gain some life. Our Hopeful Initiate is going to grow a little bit bigger, which is good. Our opponent gaining life is potentially what hurts the most here, but we still have a huge fighting chance considering they're at 5. Probably going to go ahead and pump up. Oh, wow, they're actually just going to make a token. Okay. Really hoping to hit Raiju, Cavalier again. Oh, wow, Brugathar is actually just a huge draw, but it is nighttime, isn't it? That's fine. Let's just get it down. It'll pump up our Hopeful Initiate on the following turn. Rather just keep the Valorous stance in case they do have a Destroy spell. And they have 1 card left in their hand that they just drew. Let's see what it is. Another Tenacious Underdog. They're going to blitz it in. Just that. I'll just save myself some life here. First strike. They get a redraw, but we still have some answers here for our opponent in case they decide they want to try to kill our cards. Unless it is an exile spell. It doesn't look like they have it, though. And let's see, 2 counters. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and swing out here. Train it. See how our opponent blocks. Oh, do they have the removal now? They have a Ganjo, but we'll go ahead and protect our card here. Give it indestructible. 4 damage isn't going to do anything, and now we have 2 pretty sizable threats here that our opponent does have to deal with. They're at 3, so they have to block no matter what. Go ahead and kill their cards. Yep, we'll lose the life, that's fine. And we'll pass a turn back to our opponent here. Can remove the counters from the initiate to destroy the borrowed time to exile one of these underdogs when they come down. And they just drew a land, so opponent's pretty much dead here. They don't have any blockers, and we're about to add more to the battlefield. And let's go ahead, target this borrowed time. Removing both of these counters. And make a good blocker here, so that way we don't take the damage. Not really anything they could draw here. I guess a meat hook would be good. But that'll be... we could take the 3 and let them draw the card on end step. So that way they don't hit the meat hook. Yep. Go down to 8. Yep, so they'll draw their card now. If they just draw like any removal spell, it's not really going to make a difference. And we drew Royal Eruption as well, so let's go ahead and kick the Royal Eruption, considering we're here to burn our opponents out. That's why we're here, so... took it down pretty easily there against Mardu Midrange. Definitely been enjoying this deck quite a lot. And we're back for the post-game wrap. Well, this deck was really good. You know, definitely helped us speed back up again through the ranks here in Mythic. Got us back up to rank 450. I really think that this deck's solid. It kind of showed up out of nowhere, I feel like. I know I've been missing out a bit on Standard just because I've been playing a lot of Explorer, but I was really happy to see a deck that wasn't the normal decks that we've been seeing in Standard for a bit. And honestly, this is a little bit more like the strategy that I usually like to play. So if you're looking for like ways to rank up quickly on the ladder, maybe get you to Mythic, or if this is like a type of strategy that you enjoy doing, just beating down, smashing face, burning your opponents out, anything like that, this deck's definitely for you. I think that there's actually different ways to build the deck as well. I feel like this iteration, this version of it is really, really smooth. So I can definitely see how 3 of them got to the top 8 and almost got to the finals with this deck. It actually held pretty good toe-to-toe with the mono green deck, even though you would think that, you know, their creatures being bigger would be a problem. But at the same time, having those Royal Eruptions to kill maybe like a pack leader, the Brutal Cathars to get rid of some of those 4/4s. And then before you know it, your creatures all get bigger with the Luminar Casper and the Raiju. So I could definitely see how this deck can give green decks some fits as well. But overall, I think it's a solid choice for either the ladder or for a tournament. Don't forget, we actually host 3 tournaments a month. Our schedule is going to be down below in the description. You can find all of our other content as well. And I hope that you all stay cheesy.